Our community has worked hard for the right to vote. From the Voting Rights Act of 1965, ending Jim Crow laws, to the 19th Amendment, securing women's right to vote. Voting is our power to create change and uplift our voices. This election, let's honor that legacy and shape our future. Vote November 5th, or take advantage of early voting from October 21st to the 31st and November 1st to the 3rd. Hartford, your voice matters. Let's get out there and vote.
30 seconds. Twenty seconds. 10 seconds.
'Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of All About You. And All About You is one of two different programs that I have the pleasure of hosting and producing live every single week at AccessTV.org studio. All About You is a show that's designed to give you, the viewers, some information and background towards the particular guests. And this morning, we have a very successful guest who was part of a very international, revolutionary music band that had a tremendous amount of talent and historical abilities to do things way beyond the norm. The guest this morning on All About You is labeled a keyboardist, record producer, songwriter, original member of Prince and the Revolution Band, no other than Matt Fink / Dr. Fink. Good morning, Dr. Fink. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite well. How about you, Jonathan? Thanks for having me here today.
Okay, I'm doing fine. It's our pleasure, and it's good to have you here. Matt Fink, I believe you were born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, what was it like growing up in Minneapolis?
Cold.
I always hear that.
I'm just kidding. No, Minneapolis is great. Great place to live, and it just keeps getting better. So, if you're interested in moving someplace really nice, this is the place to come. Even though, unfortunately, we had some rough times during the pandemic, as we all know, but things are getting better here in the downtown Minneapolis area. Is reviving. We have a great new mayor who's addressing all of the racial issues that were needed to be addressed. He's brought the community together, in my opinion, and also the mayor of St. Paul, too, a great guy. In fact, I've met both of them recently at special events, and they're really doing a great job in uniting the communities here.
Well, that's very good to hear, Matt.
Yeah.
Matt,
especially after the whole George Floyd thing happened, for sure. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, even long before the George Floyd, I mean, people might have had the image of Minneapolis. I know it was wasn't the TV show Mary Tyler Moore technically wasn't shot in Minneapolis, but it kind of portrayed Minneapolis.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you remember that show?
Of course, I watched it all the time. But here's the thing about Minneapolis. I mean, we're not like Chicago, we're not New York, we're not LA. But and when I was growing up, we were a smaller city. We had about 300,000 to 400,000 people living in the downtown area. The outer suburbs were totaling whatever. So if you combine the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, all the surrounding suburbs, now I think you've probably got close to 3.5 million people here now. So it's a thriving big community with a great art scene, great theater, great music. It's really thriving here, really strong. And the economy is coming together even better now after the pandemic. And I truly believe that our governor, Tim Walz, has done a great job as well.
So, man, I mean, I know even before we get into your musical career, you never had no visions on wanting to go to a bigger city like you just mentioned. That you always felt kind of content living and staying in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I considered moving to LA at one point in my career, but you know, I would travel out there to work from time to time. And of course, during my tenure with Prince, we were out there a lot. But you know, his company and the record label Warner Brothers was always putting us up, you know, in places to stay so we could work. But we never had houses we owned or anything until much later. Prince, I think, had a house out there, but I don't think he purchased it. I think he was only renting it when he needed to be out there. But regardless of that, yeah, I prefer Minneapolis. I grew up here. My family's here. I just thought that if I moved to LA to, you know, do the music business thing out there, that the grandparents wouldn't be as involved with their grandchildren, and that had a big factor for me in being close to family. So, you know, you can still, especially nowadays with digital communications, as we all have, I can do studio work here in my home, which I'm in right now. I'm in my studio. You probably can't see the equipment because I'm sitting in front of the computer, but you can do long distance session work with people just like this on video in real time. You can, or just, you know, people send me songs all the time to play on as a keyboard player. They just send me the files through the internet and I play on it, send it back. If they need any revisions, I do that. We discuss it. But I will tell you, and I don't mean to toot my own horn, but in most cases, whenever I do work for people, it very rarely goes to any kind of touch-ups or revisions.
Well, Matt, did you knew Prince as a child growing up, or any other artist from the Minneapolis scene as a child or a teenager growing up in that part of the country?
What was the question again? Did I know Prince?
Yeah, I mean, did you knew Prince as a child or a teenager before you became
absolutely
a member?
Not.
Okay.
And I'll tell. I'm going to address that issue with you because, you know, I kind of hit on the topic of, you know, racial disparity and things going on in this country that we've had for way too long. And growing up in Minneapolis is no different. It was quite segregated here growing up, not by design per se, or not, especially not my parents always instilled in me and my brother, and, you know, to not be prejudiced and to treat everybody equally. And they set great examples for us. And in fact, I had friends of all ethnicities growing up. But with that said, the Twin Cities was still segregated. There was neighborhoods here, like on the north side of Minneapolis, which is where my father grew up actually, became more and more African American. And then some of the other suburbs and other parts of Minnesota had like a big Jewish, not big, but there's a small Jewish population here, but they were segregated from everybody else. And I can attest to this because I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood and I was raised Jewish, but not in a major, you know, overtly conservative Jewish way. We were more like a reformed version of the Jewish religion. And the issue is that, you know, to me, Jews and blacks have a lot in common because of the slavery issues that we all contended with. We seem to get along well because of that. We can relate to each other because of that. But I did not know Prince because white people and black people were somewhat segregated here still. And the airwaves were segregated, meaning the radio stations that would play Prince's music were zero practically. There was one station out of that neighborhood in North Minneapolis where most of the black people resided. Not most, but a lot. It was heavily black. And they had a station called KMOJ, and they would play Prince's music in those early years, like the first couple albums. He couldn't get on mainstream radio to save his life across the country because of segregation in music and R&B pop artists. So, you know, obviously Michael Jackson in '83, Thriller came out. He crossed over to everybody big time. That opened the door for Prince even more to cross over with 1999 the following year, and then Purple Rain. But if that hadn't happened, I don't really think Prince would have had the opportunity to really get to where he did as successfully as he did.
Well,
because of those things that were happening in the industry back then. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, Dr. Fink, when technically did you actually met Prince? And I do want to get a little bit about your.
I met him at the audition for the band. I didn't even know who he was until maybe 7 months before I met him, when I heard his demo tape, which was presented to me by a friend who was working with Prince. The drummer Bobby Z. I knew him. He was a couple years older than me, but our families knew one another, and we were well acquainted with each other because we went to the same high school together. But he, like I said, he was 2 grades ahead of me. So he brought me the demo tape one day, and Bobby and I really weren't that close yet. I mean, we knew each other. We hung out very rarely, and we were in different circles of people. But for whatever reason, he wanted me to hear this tape because I think he liked my keyboard playing and was actually going to maybe recommend me to work with Prince at that point. He was thinking in his mind. He didn't come right out and say it, but he just said, "Hey, I want you to hear this." I listened to the tape. I was extremely impressed and thought it was a band playing, but it wasn't. It was Prince doing everything in the studio. And so when I learned that he and I were the same age, Prince, and he was doing everything, playing all the instruments, writing all the music, it was just really amazing, astounding for someone at the age of, I think he was 18, 19 at the time. So very few artists did that, in the industry, where they played everything, produced it themselves. It was very rare. So he got his record deal. He insisted on having control over his career and his production, which Warner Brothers didn't want to do, but they allowed it anyway because they liked him. And then I had my opportunity to audition, because when I heard that he was looking for people, I started to bug Bobby again and Prince's manager, Owen Husney, at the time. They were looking at other people. They were auditioning all kinds of keyboard players and guitarists, and they went out to LA looking for people. They hadn't even thought of me yet, So when I knew that they were looking, I threw my hat into the ring one more time. And then once I did get the audition, it took about 3 weeks from that point for Prince to make his decision as to who to hire. And he brought me in the group at that point.
Well, Matt, let's go back a little bit.
Sure.
Going into high school, what type of music did you kind of like to emulate, and how did you learn how to become a keyboardist? I mean, how did you get the introduction into becoming a musician?
Oh, okay. Well, I grew up in a what you might call a music and theater family, because my parents both had degrees in theater, but they did musical theater as well. But when they went to the University of Minnesota, they both studied there and had a training in acting, and they were doing professional voiceover work and acting in local plays. And my father was directing community theaters and, the heads of a couple different community theaters here at one point, while working the family business, which was advertising specialties. So they introduced me to music and theater at a very young age. So not only did I act in plays as a child and into my teen years, but I was playing in bands. By the time I was barely 13, I had formed my first band with neighborhood friends who literally lived down the block from me. I mean, the drummer, the guitar player, the bass player, myself, and then later on we brought in another guitar player who lived further away, and he was in the group all the way through till our senior year of high school. And then from there I went into a couple cover bands, and I was taking piano lessons all throughout this time. I was taking classical and jazz and all that stuff all through my childhood and teen years. So by the time I joined Prince, I was really pretty well prepared after playing in 3 different groups before Prince, and doing everything under the sun musically, really, in pop music, from everything from rock to jazz to Latin rock to funk and R&B pop. We were doing everything. So, the first band, though, was focused more on everything the hit songs that were on the radio at the time, which we did just about in every band. By the time I hit the one group right before Prince, we were playing all the Saturday Night Fever music in that band, because it was so big. And this was 1977, before I joined Prince at the end of '78. We were playing all the major pop and disco hits that were on the radio at that time.
And again, you were still in Minneapolis, but you was traveling throughout the country as part of the band before you actually, or was it locally?
Those groups were strictly regional, meaning the Midwest here. So we would travel to, North, South Dakota, Iowa, Wisconsin, sometimes Illinois, sometimes Nebraska, that kind of stuff. But we didn't venture too far out of the Midwest. And we played locally here quite a bit. It did, had house gigs at clubs and things like that,
Well,
regular gigs.
Well, Dr. Fink, Minneapolis sound, many people credit it towards Prince and the Revolution band, and then other acts would formulate, like The Time, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis would become producers, and you had Alexander O'Neal. But it seems like to me, if you want to credit it, maybe you can clarify exactly where did the Minneapolis sound come from. Was it actually the Prince and the Revolutionary Band that kind of labeled as the first major Minneapolis born and raised music group?
Yeah, I would say that Prince ushered it in as a producer and songwriter because, obviously he had the first version of his band, which was not really called The Revolution until the movie happened. So everything prior to that was just Prince. And then we were just his band, sidemen at that time. But the Minneapolis sound, I say, is comprised of Prince's production. He wrote and produced the first Time, all those Time albums. Then he had the Vanity Six. Then he had a group called The Family, which was unfortunately kind of shelved. It came out, but it didn't do much because the leader of the group left too soon or early on. And so there was all that going on. So somebody coined the Minneapolis sound, and I don't know if it was the media or if he did it or somebody else, but I would say that everything he did at that time, you could say was the Minneapolis sound.
Okay, Dr. Fink, your involvement, you say you were part of Prince's band even before it became Prince and the Revolution.
Right.
Which album did you kind of have a lot of work on? Was it the Controversy album? Was it the 1999 album? Was it the Purple Rain album that you had a lot of?
Well, I worked on the Dirty Mind album a little bit. I co-wrote the song Dirty Mind, and then I played the synthesizer solo on the song Head. And then I played on every album after that a little bit, one or two songs he would have the band play on them in the studio. But Purple Rain was I'd say 50% of that album was a group effort in the studio, and all of us kind of contributing our parts to those songs. But Prince was really the main lyricist and melody songwriter for those songs.
Okay, now
in fact, the majority of what he did was all his lyrics and melody. But go ahead.
Okay, well, if people would look on some of the videos from the 1999 album, and this gets into another area that you labeled yourself as the doctor, wearing the surgical scrub doctor uniform.
Well, the doctor thing came in early 1980 on the Rick James tour. That's when I had to switch over to the doctor look.
Okay. But if people look at some of the videos, which would they see you in any of the early videos of Prince and the Revolution?
Yeah,
they would.
Yeah. You could. I'm in like videos from the second album. The first album, he didn't really do any videos with the band because he didn't really have the band together yet. So none of those songs he personally didn't even shoot any videos. It wasn't a thing much yet. This is like late 78, early spring of 78 that album came out. So MTV wasn't there yet. People were occasionally doing stuff with videos to their music. Now what's interesting is once the second album came out in probably late 79, I can't remember. And then we were doing a showcase tour around the country in clubs, just to introduce ourselves to everybody, and play the music. And then somehow our management managed to get us onto a tour with Rick James and opening for Rick James for about 6.5 months, early 1980 until, mid 1980. And so that time frame is when the doctor look came in, because on that tour, Rick James was wearing something that I had on stage too for one song, which was a black and white striped jail suit. So Rick did this song called Bustin' Out of L7, and Prince came to me and he said, Rick is wearing a jail suit on one of his songs, and you're wearing a jail suit too. You're going to have to take that off, because he's the headliner. And I go, oh, shoot. Well, we didn't know that was going to happen when we got out here. So we're like 3 shows into the tour, and Prince said, what do you got for an idea for another, stage vibe? And I said, how about a guy in his doctor suit, scrub suit? They'll look like a doctor with a stethoscope and the mask and the whole thing. And he goes, hey, that's different. That's never been done before. Okay, and we'll call you Dr. Fink.
Right. And then that's how that came.
And that's how it was born, right there in Chicago, Illinois, right before a gig. They sent our wardrobe gal out to get scrub suits and all the doctor paraphernalia. And that was how that worked. And then later, if you look at my pictures of me through the years with Prince, I had different looks, as the doctor. I had different designs, like the Love Sexy era and Sign of the Times era. I have like the Dr. Kildare 60s look with the kind of upper collar up top here instead of a V-neck, and then button down the side of the shoulder like this and down your side instead of buttons up. So it's like we did a lot of interesting looks. And then for the parade tour, he had all of us in satin white pajamas with paisley designs on them. So I didn't even look like a doctor anymore for that tour. I was wearing, if you look at the album pictures in there, I'm not even in a doctor suit or wearing a stethoscope anymore. But then I brought it back after that for Sign of the Times, Love Sexy period with the Dr. Kildare vibe.
Okay. Many different things about the doctor, he look,
that's
and
right.
doctor uniform that you just broke down. When we get to kind of the pinnacle or the peak, some people labeled of the movie Purple Rain and the album soundtrack Purple Rain for Prince and the Revolution. This started being, I guess, filmed in 1983, and then the movie was released a year later in 1984. How did you feel knowing now that you're going to be part of a major movie, by somewhat of a biographical film of Prince and the Revolution band?
Well, you're always hoping for the best, and when he came to me with the idea right towards the end of the 1999 tour, he sat me down, and just the two of us, and told me, hey, I'm thinking of doing a movie. What do you think of that? And I said, really? That's interesting. What's it about? And he goes, well, we're formulating, it's going to be kind of semi-autobiographical. And I go, okay, I'm all in. If you can pull it off, I'm there. I'll support it 100%. Not that I had a choice, right?
Right,
Jonathan?
right. Okay.
But either way, I thought it was an exciting proposition. I had my misgivings slightly about it, because who knew if he could act? I had no inkling if he'd had any experience acting and doing anything in the past. I asked him, and he did not really performed in any kind of acting roles in any plays in school or done any of that I know of. So regardless of that, my concern was, okay, you've really had a great tour. This 1999 tour has been great. The album is double platinum. Are we big enough to warrant doing a movie now? And this is where Warner Brothers questioned it, because even though, yes, he had become very popular, he wasn't the Rolling Stones, and he wasn't the Beatles, and he wasn't Elvis yet. And so they were going, I don't know if we want to risk putting our money into this. Warner Brothers was kind of funny. So Prince's management said, tell you what, we believe in this so much that we will front a ton of the money, as long as you cover some of it. You come in as a partner or semi-partner, and if it does really well, you'll thank us later. So that's what they did. They came to an agreement, and Prince's management footed the majority of the budget for the movie, which I believe was between 7 and 9 million or something like that. So, and I believe it grossed 68 million, and since then, God knows and what else in sales and royalties and everything else. So it definitely made a profit for everyone back then, from a business standpoint. But from an artistic standpoint, it catapulted Prince into the stratosphere, as we all know. And the rest of us in the band just had to kind of hang on to the comet's tail while it was flying around the planet. Well, and that was about it, you know.
Well, Dr. Fink, was there any, obviously a semi-biographical film, the movie kind of labeled like Prince and the Revolution, Morris Day and the Time, like y'all were competing against each other. And I think there was one other group, or maybe a third group, I think Apollonia 6.
Apollonia 6, yeah.
Right. Was that the case, or was y'all kind of still all like one big happy family? It kind of seemed like y'all was competing against each other during the whole movie.
I personally didn't look at anything as a competition. Now, Prince, with the time, that was his creation, but it became kind of a Frankenstein's monster for him, because when we were on the 1999 tour, they were opening for us every night, and they used to kick our butt a lot of times. They were just their songs, which Prince wrote, and their energy on stage and whatever they were doing. It was a different vibe from the Revolution. The Revolution was like, we were kind of like Fleetwood Mac, you know, with the boys and girls and different ethnicities in the band, and it was kind of like an example of, hey, this is how society might be able to work if we're careful. We all might be able to have a group like this and get along and be multiracial and multigender and God knows what else. But at the same time, the time was just like this juggernaut of R&B pop energy. They were great. I loved watching their show. So we had to compete with that, and Prince knew that, and we still did well, but it bothered Prince.
Well, I think when people look at the soundtrack or the album Purple Rain, it kind of was one of the biggest albums, not just for 1984, 85, but probably one of the biggest albums of all time. I mean, I think it's one of them. It's in the top whatever.
Thriller still kicks everything in the ass, but
yeah.
And I think something else came along, another album that has usurped Thriller now, but I can't remember who the artist is.
Well, I think worldwide, Thriller still is the leading seller. I think within the United States, there's an album that has surpassed Thriller in sales. But worldwide sales, Thriller still is the leading album, about 100 million. So I think that's where you're probably getting your confusion.
Sure.
And then there was one point, I mean, you played a role, obviously, as the instrumentalist with the keyboard sound. Did you participate? You said at one point earlier that one of the albums you had about a 50%, or the Revolution had about a 50% participation rate.
Yeah. That was Purple Rain. We were all instrumental in that record as far as playing on it and contributing parts to that record.
And then after that, you would still remain part of Prince and the Revolution until what particular year?
Late 86, Prince disbanded the Revolution, and then I was retained for another 4 years with the new power generation, as that became a thing right after that.
Okay, so did you work on the 86 album? I think what was the name of the 1986 album? Parade. Yeah. Did you work on the
Yeah, a little bit, not a lot. I just did a little bit of session work on that one.
Now, was your main occupation as a keyboardist, or did you do other things in the musical band beyond just the keyboardist?
You mean for Prince?
Yes, Prince in the Revolution.
No, I was just his keyboardist. One of his Lisa Coleman and I were the two keyboardists in the group, singers, background vocalists.
Okay.
Two.
Now, currently, Dr. Fink, you still have the Revolution music band together?
Well, we're loosely working when we can. Let's put it that way. We just did 2 shows at First Avenue where Purple Rain was filmed. June 20th and 21st this year, we did 2 40th anniversary Purple Rain commemorative shows. Next year, There's the possibility of more of these in a few other cities. Nothing is in the works at the moment, but there's talk of this. So I'd say we'll know more probably towards like the end of December what we're going to do next year.
And do you have any other? Excuse me. Do you have any other outside projects or anything? You say you have your home-based studio that you do producing, or anything else in the music era that you're doing now?
Yes. Excuse me, my cat just jumped up. I'm currently working on a couple album projects here, and for people, one is local, one is out of state, and then I play with another band called St. Paul and the Minneapolis Funk All Stars. You can go to their website, St. Paul and the Minneapolis Funk All Stars, and we're performing, every once in a while we'll get something. We kind of do private special events and corporate events, and then we do also some festivals and outdoor shows, indoor as well, if they make, like for instance, the 29th of October we're going to be in Los Angeles at a venue called it's called the Vibrato Jazz Club. Jazz Grill is what it's called, and it's a cute little venue right up there in the Bel Air area, supper club, and we're doing a couple of shows there on the 29th, couple sets of music. And what else? I work with some other local artists here occasionally, just doing local gigs for fun. Little extra cash on the side, and that's it.
Right.
Well,
Matt, I think I have a couple questions I want to ask you. How many members or how many people from that Minneapolis sound like yourself have still remained in Minneapolis or the Minneapolis-St. Paul region?
Quite a few.
Quite a few?
Okay. Quite a few. Yeah.
Could you name any?
Well, Yeah, Jelly Bean Johnson lives here, and in fact, he plays with the Funk St. Paul and the Minneapolis Funk All Stars from time to time when he's available. If he's not playing with the time, he's playing with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he Kirk Johnson from the MPG works with us. Let's see. There's a guitar player named the guy from Mint Condition, Homer Odell. You ever heard of him from Mint Condition?
I've heard of Mint Condition. I don't know if I remember Homer.
He's a local guitarist. He works with us. There's other local people that work with this group from time to time as well, and other out of town people too.
Mm-hmm.
Work with the Funk All Stars as well. A couple different people.
Well, I believe from up until a certain period of time.
Elisa Fiorello is a singer from the MPG that works with us, and Oliver Lieber on guitar. So anyway, I could name. There's a lot of people that fill in on the Funk All Stars from time to time.
Right.
But go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I remember up until a certain period of time, even Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, they had their studio operation, and they were residing in Minneapolis. But I do believe they have moved.
They moved to LA.
LA,
yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're in LA now. They've been there a while now. In fact, I just saw them recently. But go ahead.
Well, when Janet Jackson did the Control album, did you ever had any not participation, but was you exposed, or did you meet Janet Jackson at that time, or was that strictly with Jimmy Jam?
I did not meet her back then.
Okay.
No.
To do that.
No.
Well, again, that's
yeah.
Well, that's a separate. I mean, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis kind of broke away from the time, but they were still working under Prince. So it's kind of like this umbrella that even though they were, once Prince let them go,
mm-hmm. They were on tour with the time back in the 80s, and they got caught in a snowstorm somewhere. They were working with somebody out of town, and they couldn't make a show on tour because of bad weather. And Prince was very upset and decided that they would have to be let go because they weren't responsible in his eyes to be, they should have been not doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
And running the risk of having a flight get canceled or whatever from where they were. So that's what ended that relationship back then. And then of course, Lewis and they went on to Jam and Lewis went on to become very successful producers. So, but yeah, and I've always stayed in touch with those guys over the years, Jam and Lewis.
Mm-hmm. Now,
Yeah.
some of the other artists that you've worked with, it looked like on your bio you've worked with several other different artists in the music industry. Could you kind of elaborate a little bit on some of the artists that you have worked with?
Well, in the 80s, I was a session player on a lot of things
Hmm.
around here.
Okay.
And I've done session work for people since then, but there was a group called Lip Sync, which had that big hit Funky Town. I played on one of their fourth album. The Jets was a successful group out of Minneapolis too. Do
Mm.
you remember the
I do
Jets?
remember them.
So I played on their hit album a little bit, and I don't have my bio in front of me,
mm, yeah.
but but back then, I was doing stuff for different people, and then now since then, since I stayed in Minneapolis, the majority of what I've done over the years has been with local artists, people that a lot of people may have not have heard of even because they don't really have a big following on the national stage or never did. They were just strictly local people.
Hmm.
You know.
Now
But
do you do producing like as a record producer that was listed on your bio?
yeah,
You do.
yes,
Okay.
yeah,
Uh.
yeah, and then my oldest son Maxwell, he's a producer as well, and he's also an artist. He's putting out different things, and he's been working with a great songwriting team that's placing material with major label artists.
Mhm. Now, when you're doing the producing, are you trying to have the sound similar to what you were doing with Prince and the Revolution, or are you trying to do a different sound, or you look at every artist
You just
differently?
got to look at every artist and what their needs are and what they're looking for. You just have to be in communication with them, and you know, sometimes if your producer and a record label hires you to be the producer, they give you the ultimate say usually, and contractually, the producers get ultimate say in what happens on some of these records.
Mm.
A lot of times.
Right. And then this club First Avenue, does it still have that same type of appearance and feel like it did in the Purple Rain movie, or is it something totally different? If you was
It's very similar. I
so,
mean, they've renovated it some more. They fixed it up even more nicely since then.
uh-huh.
So it's nice. It's a nice venue. Very
Okay.
nice
Nice
these
video.
days.
Right.
Yeah.
You say again towards future projects, you do a lot of your studio work at your home base studio. Are you involved with any other particular businesses or companies in the music or entertainment industry that you wanted to discuss a little bit before we kind of wrap down to this show?
Yeah, I do sync licensing work for artists. Like if you have songs, I can, try to shop them for movie and television work. That's called sync licensing. And I have a strong relationship with APM Music out of Los Angeles, which is the largest music library in North America. And then I also have an exclusive arrangement with Pop-Up Music out of the UK
Mm-hmm.
for song placement in movies and TV.
All right. Let me ask you a question. If it was one artist, if you had to choose between that you would like to work towards as a producer, past or present, who would that artist be?
Someone that I could work with, you mean?
Yes, like a singer that you wanted to produce their particular album. Like, could you think of anybody that you would really love to work with? The one person that kind of stands out?
Sure. Sure. There's several.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's quite a few of them out there.
Okay.
I would love to work with someone like you know, Taylor Swift,
Mm-hmm.
Lady Gaga,
Right.
um, just any of the top 10 artists out there. I would work with them, or it's some of the lesser known people. I admire quite a few that are up and comers too out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And what would you like for people to remember or recognize about yourself too, but also being members of Prince and the Revolutionary Band? Is there anything that kind of stand out that you would like for people to kind of remember, sort of like a legacy in that music era that you were part of?
I would say that Prince's overarching message to humanity was inclusivity for everyone, and let go of your bias and prejudices, and try to spread love and togetherness and just having fun with life, and not being so dang serious and all the time. The politics right now are just corrosive and negative all the time. I can't take it.
Yeah.
And Prince didn't like politics. I used to ask him, say, "So who are you voting for?" Like when Reagan was running and Mondale and people back in the 80s, I always wanted to pick his brain and see what he was thinking. He would not talk politics with me.
Right.
So he knew better. And now I know better not to talk politics with friends. So I try to avoid it unless they ask me. If someone wants my opinion and they ask me who I'm voting for, I usually will tell them. But I'm not overtly out there trying to convert anybody to anything if they're on the opposite side of what I believe. But I can certainly make a strong case for them to vote the way I'd like them to vote.
Right. Okay. Well, Matt, I mean, it sounds like this would be, I guess this is one way to end a particular program from your last statements, but I always like to ask the guests at the end of the show if there's any last words, any last things that they would like for people to know about yourself. I might have already asked you that question somewhat, but could you kind of, feel free to let anybody know if anything that you want people to know, what you're doing, what you're planning to do. The mic is yours.
Yeah. First of all, I'm just like, I'm getting older. I'm thinking of, semi-retiring. So I'll see. I'm going to just keep going as long as I can and playing live and writing and doing whatever I can. But sometimes I like to take a break and relax because I'm getting older. But in the meantime, the next generation is coming. And there's some amazing artists out there. Pay attention to them, and please try to treat each other with respect and love and kindness, and stop all the vitriol that's in our hearts at this time with this contentious political climate we live in.
Right. Well, Matt, those are going to have to be your last words. It was a fun type of atmosphere, fun type of show. You made it real down to earth, and it was a pleasure having you as a special guest this morning on the All About You talk show. And I wish you and the Revolution Band and your family the best of luck in the very near future.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
You're welcome, and thank you, too. Okay, this is Jonathan Small. I just enjoyed hosting this edition of All About You with the special guest, keyboardist, record producer, songwriter of Prince and the Revolution Band. And it was a real, like I mentioned, a fun, down-to-earth type of interview. And I hope for you, the listening audience, you was able to get something out of this particular show. Currently working on putting together a show for next week. And like I say to people out there every single week, have a very blessed day and keep the faith. Thank you.